Hey guys, welcome to the Learn Feng Shui podcast, where you'll learn Feng Shui from a classical point of view, taking out the myth and superstition. So if you're interested in learning Feng Shui, Chinese astrology, all things Chinese metaphysics, as well as the superstitions and myths that connect it all, you'll enjoy learning Feng Shui with me. Hey guys, welcome to the Learn Feng Shui podcast, where ancient traditions meets modern living. I'm Candace Berlanga, a certified Feng Shui practitioner and a red ribbon professional with the International Feng Shui Guild. Today we're going to look at how people throughout history have chosen the perfect wedding dates, and it's really not just based on convenience. They did align with seasonal cycles, celestial events, and even energetic influences. So there is a lot of wisdom from European folklore and Feng Shui date selection methods, and today we're going to look at those traditions and how they can still guide us today. So, whether you're planning a wedding, your wedding date might be set already because it's a little late in the season, I don't know, or you just like learning about the deeper meaning behind special dates, I think this episode will have something for you. So, let's get into it. When it comes to choosing a wedding day, modern couples usually think about convenience. They want to know which venues are open, schedules, maybe even their favorite time of year, favorite season. But historically, wedding timing was deeply connected to nature, weather patterns, cultural traditions. And in many parts of the world, people plan their ceremonies around cycles of the sun, seasonal shifts, and even local superstitions of when a marriage would be most prosperous. Let's start by looking at how the different cultures chose the best time of year for the wedding and how weather actually played a big role in these decisions. It is traditional to get married usually in the spring or summer because it is preferred for good weather. It also symbolizes fertility and it was easier to travel back then. All the sources that I have noted will be linked in the show notes. Romans were superstitious and therefore the calendar played a big part in selecting a wedding date. Many dates were simply off limits. February and May were considered unlucky months, and the 1st, 5th, and 15th were considered unlucky. The month of June was named after Juno, the queen of the gods, and therefore it was a sacred month. And Romans considered this month the luckiest of all, which is why I think a lot of brides do get married in June in the summer. Autumn was linked to harvest celebrations, prosperity, and stability. Winter was less common, but tied to festivals like Yule and Christmas, and more practical for noble families that had a good food storage. Along with the general seasonal dates for getting married, there were cross-quarter days that were tied to weddings also and were kind of traditional to get married on. So symbolic, falls around February 1st or 2nd, it represents the returning of the light and fertility. And it is that midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Then we have Beltane, which is the midpoint between the spring equinox and the summer solstice, which is around May 1st or so. It's this fire energy. It represented passion and was traditional for hand fasting traditions, which was just a pledge and like a declaration of marriage. Then we have Lunasa, which is August 1st, and that is the midway point between the summer solstice and the fall equinox. And that, of course, represents like the first harvest and represents prosperity and marriage. Then we have Samhain, which of course corresponds closely with Halloween and wasn't as common, but does represent mystical and spiritual unions. Kind of keeping on that theme of weather, one thing you can actually do now is look at those Jie Qi or those solar cycles, those micro seasons that I talk about each month. So we know that during certain periods that the weather might be more crazy, if you're trying to apply that to daily life now. One thing you could do is check the Farmer's Almanac. It does have very accurate weather predictions. The solar cycles or those Jie Qi cycles can also help if you plan those around times of years that it's supposed to be nicer. So if you're planning an outdoor wedding or a reception that's going to be outside, you might consider using these micro seasons. The first one you might want to consider is Qingming, which is a Tomb Sweeping Festival. It's called Clear and Bright. That starts around April 5th or so, and it lasts till about April 20th. It is a time of year where the temperatures are a lot more mild and the skies are supposed to be clear. Another one you can use is Minor and Major Heat. So that cycle, July, of course, is usually predictably warm weather. And it could be pretty humid just depending on where you live, but the whole month of July, pretty consistent. Sometimes we tend to get Rain here, and for some reason, every 4th of July, of course, we're outside doing our fireworks, but for some reason, we get like a dust storm or a rainstorm. Another one you can use is one called end of heat, usually the period from August 21st or so till September 7th. It's still warm, but it is starting to cool down in the evenings very imperceptibly, very slightly, making it a little more comfortable. So if you're going to have an outdoor wedding, you might want to consider around that time. Another one is the autumn equinox because there's more balanced temperature and it can be more ideal for a fall wedding. And by September 22nd or ish, around that time, the temperatures are more balanced. We have more balanced day and night time, just like we do in the spring. But of course, the spring, it's very unpredictable in the weather. Uh, Dates you want to avoid or Jie Qi cycles you want to avoid are awakening of insects, which is now March 5th or so through around March 20th. Unpredictable rain, storm season starts. We have had the worst wind. It's usually pretty common here in West Texas to get really windy springs. We had like almost zero visibility with the dirt. It was so crazy. So obviously if you're going to have some sort of outdoor wedding, March is not the time to do it, especially if regionally for you, it's a time where there's dust storms, a lot of wind. White dew is another time you want to avoid September 7th or so through the 22nd. The weather starts cooling down really fast at night, and there's more morning dew and fog, and the grass could just be a little wetter. So you might want to avoid that. Two others you want to avoid really the month of October. The month of October, there is usually a risk of an early frost and it gets quite cold at night for sure. So those are just sometimes you want to avoid planning an outdoor wedding according to those micro seasons. Keeping on the theme of weather, if you get a little rain, don't worry because it's actually supposed to mean good luck. So there is a weather folklore or superstitions surrounding weather also. And again, starting with rain, it says that rain is said to wash away worry, sadness, and sorrow. As such, it's said to bring luck and good fortune to newlyweds, especially in the baby department, and it's said to increase fertility. The Hindus have a saying, a wet knot is more difficult to unravel. And in America, we tend to look at rain on our wedding day, not ironically like Alanis Morissette says, but rather in a good light. And in Ireland, on the other hand, rain may mean a sorrowful future lays ahead. If it's overcast, if the sky is cloudy or particularly windy, this can mean difficult times lay ahead for a seemingly otherwise happy couple. Don't get discouraged though. Marriage is typically a system of compromises and battles to be fought together, and from which you two will emerge victorious. And snow on your wedding day could symbolize warmth and peace. So much like one seeks during a harsh winter, if you see a incoming storm planned for your wedding day, don't get discouraged. This may symbolize beauty and work out nicer than you may imagine. I think getting married in the snow sounds beautiful. What does the sunshine say about a wedding day? That's usually what you want, but a sunny day doesn't have superstitious undertones necessarily, but it may, however, make easier travel for you and your guests. There's a common tradition of burying a bottle of bourbon upside down 30 days before your wedding, which is said to bring about good weather when your wedding day rolls around. I just thought that was a fun little tidbit to include. I love a good Weatherlore story. Looking back at the ancients and how they selected wedding dates, lunar cycles was a big consideration. And the ancient Greeks believed that marriages consummated during the full moon were the most prosperous and the happiest, but a waning moon boded ill for wedded bliss. The full moon is considered to be an ideal time to accept a marriage proposal, and folklore has it that if a young woman sees a dove on the new moon at the same instant, she should say, bright moon, bright and fair, lift your right foot, there'll be a hair. And when she removes her shoe, she'll actually find a hair that is the same color as her future husband's. And a new moon in your dreams promises increased wealth or a happy marriage. Wedding dates corresponded with the moon cycles. We know that the observance of the lunar cycles is huge in Asian cultures, but apparently has little to do with wedding planning. Another way the ancients would select their wedding date would be around religious and saint days. I think because most people were kind of together already, the churches were full. Usually, Catholic or Orthodox traditions influence these wedding dates. And the popular saint's day for marriage, of course, is St. Valentine's Day with this obvious modern connection to love. That's when me and my husband got married, actually. It was a special date for both of us. St. Martin's Day, November 11th, it was a traditional day because there was harvest celebrations and communal feasting going on. That kind of clashes with what we said about not getting married during the month of November. Different societies had different beliefs. St. John's Day around June 24th or so was a midsummer festival and that symbolized fertility. And then St. Lucy's Day around December 13th, that light overcoming darkness, and does correspond closely with the winter solstice. I think it was a thing that they went ahead and kind of piggybacked on the fact that people were in town visiting. Remember, people had to travel back then, and it was could be quite difficult to come several times a year. So, if they were already there for a feast in their hometown, it just makes sense to have a priest marry you. A lot of folklore and poems did surface around the dates that are believed to be best for weddings, usually corresponding with days of the week and the months. One of the poems that focuses on the days of the week says Monday brides will be healthy, Tuesday brides will be wealthy, Wednesday brides do best of all, Thursday brides will suffer losses, Friday brides will suffer crosses, and Saturday brides will have no luck at all, which is very general, right? It's a very general statement because, I mean, in this day and age, who has time to get married on a weekday? Usually those are planned for Saturdays. So I would take that with a grain of salt. Another poem here reads Married when the year is new, he'll be loving, kind, and true. When February birds do mate, you wed not, dread your fate. If you wed when March winds blow, joy and sorrow both you'll know. Marry in April when you can, joy for a maiden and a man. Marry in the month of May, you'll surely rue the day. Marry when June roses grow, over land and sea you'll go. Those who in July do wed must labor for their daily bread. Whoever wed in August be, many a change is sure to see. Marry in September's shrine, you'll be living rich and fine. If in October you marry, love will come, but riches tarry. If you wed in bleak November, only joys will come. Remember, when December snows fall fast, merry and true love will last. And I just thought that was a pretty fun little poem. Again, these are just to be taken as just a fun little folklore, just a fun traditional thing to look at for wedding date selection. Going back to Eastern traditions, one thing that's very commonly used with date selection for weddings is to look at a good date for the couple. And this is done by looking one at the zodiac signs, and it can get very, very detailed. So you want to avoid days that clash your zodiac sign. It's probably best to hire somebody who specializes in date selection and specifically for weddings because it can actually get pretty complex. In Chinese metaphysics, there's also a system called the 12-day officers, where each day carries a specific energy that influences certain activities. So if you see on my date selection part of my blog, I usually will put which activities are best for that specific date. So you can kind of think of it like this cosmic calendar. Some days are naturally better for beginnings, celebrations, or even long term commitments. And those dates would be called, first one is an established day. It's a day that represents new beginnings, establishing something, going and starting something new. It's a strong choice for couples wanting to get married. Stable day is actually a really good one too. It symbolizes like a long term stability, symbolizes harmony, just that long term commitment. Again, stability, as in the date says, it's a really good choice for marriage also. I think one of the best dates that's just good for all around anything is one called a success day. A really lucky day. It's really auspicious and it's supposed to ensure a long and happy, fruitful marriage. But just like there's good dates with that 12-day officers, there's bad dates. And there's probably more bad dates than good ones if you use this a specific method of date selection. The first one, just like it says in the name, is called Destruction Day. It's associated with disruptions and instability. It's good for groundbreaking and it could be good for demolition, but is not good for a marriage. The next is a danger day, which is actually good for arranging your bed and feng shui adjustments and activations, but it's not really good for marriage. It is not really ideal for like these major life events and more for feng shui praying, stuff like that. It also carries the connotation of, just like it says, danger. And so there's this underlying component of, if you do something risky, you might get injured. So you risk getting injured or something on your wedding day, or maybe having one of your guests or something bad happening on your wedding day. Close day. You don't want to get married on a close day. It symbolizes endings rather than beginnings. So just avoid the close day. And the remove day, it just sort of represents removing an energy or taking something away. And obviously, you don't want that connotation or that energy to be behind your marriage. You want something to be lasting and long term. And then lastly is a full day. So it's a kind of energy where if you start something that day, that energy will continue. So it said if you move on a full day, you will move again. If you get an accident on a full day, you'll get an accident again. It's just something that is repetitive. So if you get married on a full day, you don't want to get married again. It carries the connotation of having more than one spouse. You want to avoid those days. Something to kind of remember when planning your wedding. One thing you do need to remember is that every culture has their own traditions. If specific days are better for you, then you need to make sure that you're following that. Different cultures have different dates that are luckier to get married, different traditions and all kinds of stuff, different folklore and everything. So remember to choose what works best for your beliefs, your cultural traditions, and even the weather, if you're planning off the weather or something like that. Don't get too worried or too worked up or too focused on something being bad, if that makes sense. Because I feel like when you focus on, is this a bad day? Is this bad for me? Then what you're going to get is bad. What you need to be thinking is, let me pick the best day, that works for both of us. Don't overthink things. And I'm sure your marriage will be long and prosperous. Remember, choosing a wedding date isn't just about picking a good day that looks good on the calendar, but we can align with these energies and we can find wisdom in the way our ancestors approach timing. So, if you're planning a wedding or just like learning about this deeper meaning behind the dates, I hope this episode gave you a new perspective on how to choose a date with intention. Next week will be Sense of Spring and Folklore of the Rabbit. So, hopefully, you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to give a little bit of a review. All right, guys, I'll catch you guys next week.
For a free energy mapping of your floor plan, please check the link in the show notes. To support today's podcast, go to learnfengshui.com, sign up for emails, leave a review, and share with your family and friends.